Hey, guess what, everybody? Go listen to the Break It Down show.
Hey, this is John.
And this is Pete.
And this week, we are excited to have Scott McEwen.
Yeah, the author of American Sniper. We've talked to Jim DeFelice. Now we've talked to Scott McEwen.
Interesting guys, both of them.
Both of them.
This week, though, we're going to concentrate on Scott because, man,
Jesus.
this dude is man business.
Man business.
He's just a robust liver of life. He's an overachiever.
Yeah.
But you'd never know it talking to him because he's just so
laid back
and cool, man.
Yeah.
He's a surfer.
He goes out and he hunts moose. And
He's a hunter.
Says, you bears, you can't have my moose.
He's a hunter of large things that kill things our size.
And then bears come and try to take his food, and sometimes the bear wins.
But not if he has anything to say about it.
Man.
He's a trial attorney.
Yep.
Maybe a reformed trial attorney.
I think that's more accurate, yeah. Now he's just an author, getting just some movie deals done.
That's all.
When you write the number one book in the land, and that turns into the number one movie in the land, and the greatest simultaneously, the greatest January release movie ever
in history.
Yeah, you get to write a book and you get to make another movie.
By the way, he wrote a book with his pal.
Yeah,
he was telling his buddy's story, and that's really what came out of it. Is that the story and the way that they told it, and the important things that they pulled out of the experience that Chris Kyle went through.
Yeah,
became a story that is right now the biggest story in the world.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're about to go into Oscar season, and it's nominated for 6 awards, so we'll see what it wins. But the story they wrote, yes, Chris went out and he was the legend and he did a lot of operations, but the story is a love story.
Yeah.
It's love of his brothers and sisters in arms, love of his family, love of his country. There's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah, and it was captured brilliantly. Brilliantly. Lovingly, I would also say. And it's really exciting to have Scott with us.
Yeah.
He's gracious enough to talk to us. Everybody wants his time.
Everybody wants his time.
And he's chosen to spend some of it on the Break It Down show, so we're really excited about that.
Yeah, so here you go. Here's Scott McEwen. Hey, man. So are you from San Diego originally, or where are you from?
No, I grew up in Eastern Oregon. I grew up in the mountains near the Idaho border, a place called Heppner, Oregon, right out of a town called Pendleton, Oregon, that has a pretty famous rodeo there called the Pendleton Roundup.
Yeah, and you're an avid hunter too.
Yeah, I grew up hunting, fishing, in the mountains. Basically, just enjoyed anything I could do in the outdoors.
That's cool.
Here's the interesting thing. I'm not going to yell action and hit the record button. I just hit the record button. And it's funny because naturally we want to talk to you about you. And I imagine American Sniper is going to come up. But coincidentally, one of the things that I like about Clint Eastwood is he doesn't yell action. He just kind of rolls the camera and he says, okay, well, whenever you want to get started, go ahead and get started. And somebody asked him, well, why? You're a director. How come you don't yell action? And he said, because I used to make Westerns with horses. And when you yell action, horses get all prickly and pissed off.
Yeah, and the other thing, too, is, with his style of direction is he doesn't like people to get tense or, in any way, as far as the human reaction, I guess it's a similar thing that he wants to avoid relative to his human subjects that he's working with, too, because he just kind of says, okay, whenever you guys are ready, let's start the conversation. Let's roll it, and go. And, it just seems like he does so many less shoots as a result of that. And he just basically gets into it, and, he'll do a lot of the stuff that he did for the movie was in one shot. Basically, one first time they did it, and it's done.
Yeah. And, when you get that comfort level out of an actor, when they can really nail the performance, you have to give them the latitude and the room to do that. Yeah,
that's the truth. And, and he's, the guy's, obviously he's a master at his craft, but beyond that, he's just a relaxed kind of guy. He's not some type of prima donna that you see with hear about some of these directors that go off on the set or things of that nature. That's just not his style. And I don't think it probably ever was, but certainly, at 84, he's learned to, let's just say, deal with people as people. And I think he gets more out of everybody as a result of that.
I suppose 84 years on the planet is going to really do a lot for taking pretense away from, you gotta take yourself a whole lot less seriously.
And in that industry, if there's anybody up in that town that can say they've been there and done that, he's been there and done that.
And done everything. Yeah, really.
Yeah, he's been
so you got to respect the man, not only for his body of work, in directing, but in acting, but also he's pretty much stayed out of that whole limelight and that whole, I shouldn't say limelight, I should say crap light, that you see up there with all these guys, even in their younger years or whatever else, getting involved in things they don't want to get involved in. You just don't see Clint involved in any of that. He's just not his style. And, I really like that about that guy.
Yeah, he doesn't have time for it. He's led a really, really just cool life. I mean, doing interesting things all the time. And here's my segue. So is Scott McEwen, man. You got a really interesting life.
Yeah, well, at the moment it's pretty crazy, but it's, let's just say it's become almost gratifying to see, the message that Chris wanted to say and I wanted to say, and we really wanted to get out there. It's become gratifying to see that people are finally getting that message and getting it loud and clear of, support the troops, support those that have fought for us. And it's okay to love this country. That's not a bad thing.
It's not a bad
thing. To
thing.
think, this is a great country. And, and I personally believe that, and I know Chris believed that. And that was one of the messages, and we wanted to come through as hard and as loud as possible in preparing and getting American Sniper together.
The story is a beautiful story, and you guys did a great job. I read the book months ago. We had Jim DeFelice on the show already. You guys did. You told the story in a way that, for me, as a multi-tour combat veteran, man, I identify with it. And I also identify the people that don't understand Chris Kyle, the message, and they get a lot of it wrong because they're not supposed to understand it. They can't fathom what Ramadi is like. They can't fathom what Tal Afar was like when I was there. They have no idea that kind of the way reality is not warped. It's a different reality altogether. And Chris lived that life, and he lived a very hard life day after day after day out there. I got to see the beauty of the Iraqi people. I was very fortunate to sit in a lot of their homes and meet their families, and I have a different opinion, but I was afforded a completely different perspective than him. And you guys showed, how hard that life is and how hard it is to come home. And the people that go do that stuff for us, they pay a heavy toll when they're there, but it's hard for us to come home and our families. My daughter has paid that toll for 10 years. We have our rhythm that we have, but we've learned that rhythm by me not being around, by me being in harm's way, and thank you for telling that story because it affects all of us.
Yeah, and I think that was really the point too, is when I first got involved in that, way before Jim was ever involved in any of that other stuff towards the end. But when Chris and I were first talking about the whole book concept and, over a few beers here in San Diego, I heard, I was at their house for dinner, I believe, and Taya was saying, I asked her, I said, Taya, what is the craziest story you can tell me about Chris during this whole thing? And she said, Scott, the time that freaked me out the worst was when he was in a firefight and we were on a sat phone, and the sat phone remained open, and Chris was in the middle of a really pretty heavy battle for about a half an hour, and RPGs going off, full-on automatic gunfire, screaming, people, moving left, moving right, giving orders. Chris was, laying down a line of fire, and you could hear the reaction in the background, got him, enemy on the left, got incoming here, whatever. And then the phone went dead. And, and I thought to myself, how, and she couldn't call anybody. She couldn't call anybody either in command or SOCOM or anybody else at the SEALs, because he wasn't supposed to be on a sat phone with her while he was out on patrol. But this is what they do sometimes because you're at war, 24/7, and he wanted to call his wife. So that scene in the movie made it into the movie pretty much accurately. But I thought to myself, my God, what a crazy, crazy thing to go through. And then she didn't hear from him for 3 days.
Yeah.
And for all she knew, that phone went dead because, either an RPG had hit or blown up or whatever, and she thought Chris was gone. And I'm telling you, it just seemed like the horror of the war for the families really just came home so hard when I heard that story. And I thought that is something that has to make it into the book, and ultimately made it into the movie. And so that whole reaction by Taya really formed up from that day that she told me that story, and that whole point by Chris, this is where I'm at, and then counterpoint by Taya, this is where the family's at, was kind of framed off of that one thing.
Man, and that is a great illustrative point. And if Chris's story isn't close enough for you, I'll tell you my own story like that. Anytime someone dies in combat for a unit, there is a comms blackout. Doesn't matter. And I go out every day. My fiance, she knows I go out every day on combat patrols. And I can't warn her that time is coming. It just happens. The curtain goes down. You cannot call anybody. Can't get a hold of anybody. There is no internet going out. You can see stuff, but you can't get a hold of anybody. And
Sure.
think about that. All of a sudden, I call every day. I do what I call my lady maintenance. I need to go do lady maintenance. I need to go take care of my family. And, I block time for that every day. And all of a sudden, that doesn't happen. And I go out on tours every day. Yikes. That freaks everybody out. And my fiance, she's a widower, so she doesn't want to be a 2-time widower,
Yeah.
That's a heavy toll. That's a really heavy toll.
No, I know, dude. That's where the comms, almost while it brings people closer and keeps you closer as a family, it also brings them closer to war. I mean, back in the day, if you will, even during the Vietnam era or certainly the World War II era or Korean War era, we didn't have these comms. You didn't have the ability to make these comms. It just didn't happen that way. So, and the proverbial black cart pulling up in front of the house was your worst nightmare. But now with the comms being so much better, it's almost as if they become more of a part of the battlefield experience, which has its negatives. Certainly for the family, it can have its negatives as well as the positive of being in better communication. You also become a part of that warrior's life on the battlefield. And it's bizarre for that reason. And I think Clint really did a good job of portraying that in the movie.
How did you get involved to begin with?
Chris and I were introduced to each other in East San Diego County. He lived in a place called Alpine, east of San Diego, and I lived very near his house. And so another SEAL team buddy of mine that I knew real well knew Chris, and he just told me, he said, "Dude, I want you to meet this guy. He's really a special dude." And and they call him the legend in the teams, and they're not kidding. This guy's a shooter. And so I just, went out for a beer one night with Chris and started, and I think his kids were even there that night. We were in, in a small restaurant/bar and having a couple brews, and and he just started telling me some stories. He'd just gotten back from something, and he's like, "Yeah, and then this happened, and this happened, this happened." I'm like, "Dude, this is crazy. This is historical. This is like the Battle of Normandy Beach combined with the Battle of Iwo Jima in our time, particularly in light of what he'd gone through in Fallujah and Ramadi. What a bloodbath both of those towns were, particularly when we first took them back. I felt like it was really historically important that the level and the intensity and the experience of his, not just himself, but, Team 3, Charlie, that really be recorded for history. And that's kind of the beginning of American Sniper.
Wow. We figured as much because when we talked to Jim, I know that, the publishers, he has a body of work that's specific to that, but you do too. So it was really a natural thing for a guy who had a story that was so special that needed to get out and that needed somebody who could communicate not only the technical stuff, but the human aspect. And you have an interesting combination of abilities to do both of those things because you're very familiar with long range shooting.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, too, that Chris and I really kind of, I guess we were kindred spirits in a certain way while he was at war, doing his shooting. I mean, I pretty much consider myself to be an expert on the ballistics of a 300 Winchester Magnum because I did my own loading, hand loading, mixing of gunpowders, weights, bullets, trajectories, everything else, and Chris's favorite gun and really his gun that he did most of his work with in Iraq was the 300 Winchester Magnum. And, we always had similar experiences with the gun and how flat shooting it was and what a great rifle it really is and round it really is. But, from different angles, but, we would always be shooting, talking, comparing notes, things of that nature. So I felt it was fascinating to hear his from a SEAL team perspective and mine from just a guy growing up, taking 1,000-yard shots at big game animals and knowing, the ballistics of the gun and how it operates, in long range.
That's a pretty unique thing to have in common.
it was strange, but I mean, that's really what it was. And one of the things was the fact that we both knew that round so well, and he lived it and breathed it and kept him alive, and a lot of other people alive, but mine was more on a hunting aspect and shooting aspect.
What's the longest shot you have a kill for with the big game that you hunt?
With my 300, I would say right at 1,000 yards, maybe 1,100.
And what did you get, an elk, or what did you shoot?
That was an elk, yeah.
So this is for our listeners to get some perspective. Scott draws down 1,000 yards away, 2/3 of a mile, and shoots a giant elk. Now you have to go get it,
and it's 2/3 of a mile away.
Yeah,
yeah,
dude, that's hard. You chose a hard hobby.
Yeah, well, it depends.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you got especially with big game, you always have to get your big game out of there, depending on the terrain you're at and everything else. But you got to remember something. Chris made a shot and a confirmed kill at 2,100 yards, double that.
Wow.
And I can't even imagine. And he admitted it. He said, I said, dude, at that range, even with a 25 power Night Force scope, you're still looking at a dot out there. You can't tell X, Y, or Z. All you can tell is there's something out there, and that it had a rocket launcher, RPG in his arms. Basically, you could see a figure, and with an RPG, you could basically see on your crosshairs the RPG. He said, "Yeah, man." I said, "You can't even get ballistics. You can't even dope that shot. You basically take it up, and then you just move the barrel up, and it's like shooting a mortar round."
Yeah, Kentucky windage. Yeah.
Exactly. And he said, "Yep." And he said, "Man, I saw him hit the ground when that thing touched him out there, because there was an Army patrol going by right at the same time." And that was the shot that they depict in the movie against the butcher. But let's just say there was a little editorial freedom on that one.
Well, there's got to be. Look, Hollywood's got to tell the story, and if
sure,
if there's an Apache above, Apaches don't miss. Those guys, look, they don't hit with every single round. But if they miss with one, there's 1,000 more right behind it, and they kill things, So those of us that know can accept it. We know that there's, I've been through sandstorms. Sandstorms aren't like that. But what is real is Solder City is a shithole, and no one has to. Look, what people don't understand who are critical of the movie is how horrible Solder City was. And I don't mean us to them. I mean Iraqis to Iraqis. Literal human butcher shops in the basements, very often people being coerced at with machetes and death. So let's understand, this is not the suburbs. This is a horrible place to go. And here he is, here he is trying to help keep his brothers and sisters in arms alive. And man, it is not easy. Look, Solder City is terrible. It's the worst place on earth if you ever had to go there and do anything. It's going to be horrible.
Yeah, that's what and I heard the same thing. And at the end there, they depict Chris getting shot, but if you read that scene in the book, that scene in the book was a little bit different, and Jason decided to do that a little bit differently than what I would have done it. But obviously, I'm going to defer to his writing expertise. He did the script, the screenplay for the film. But in the book, I remember that scene vividly when Chris described it to me for the first time. And that is that he got shot first in the head. And, well, when I say the head, it grazed the side of his head to the point where it drew a bullet line through his hairline. And that's how close it came to hitting him directly in the head. And then, but what it did was it took his night vision, his goggles that he had on, and basically ripped the front of his skin on the front of his forehead completely off because the bullet hit so hard on his helmet. And he had his goggles down at the time. It was a night situation, and it just basically ripped all the skin on the front of his head off because it took the bullet when it came by. It took the helmet off so quick, just ripped it off. And he had blood streaming down in his face, and then was shot in the back almost immediately. Full on point blank AK round right in the back, but he had double plates because they knew it was going to be a hellhole firefight. So he double plated, and thank God, the plates stopped the bullet. But it just flattened him out on the ground and basically knocked the wind out of him. A mule just kicked him, and and he's like laying there and thinking, I'm blind and I've been shot in the back. God said, "This isn't your time," and Chris saw God when that happened.
Man, I
He
bet.
told me, he said, I realized that moment that I was not invincible.
Wow.
Let that sink in for a second. One day, Chris Kyle went to work and had to wear not one, but two ballistic plates in his vest.
Yeah, yeah. That's how bad they knew that town was.
Man,
it wasn't a matter.
Yeah.
They knew firefight was coming, and they knew it was going to be close combat. The whole time they were in there.
Yeah. So one of the things that it's hard to get across, what those guys did. First, let me back up. The Fallujah fight, right? It started really bad when they took those 4 contractors out of the cars and they killed them and strung them up to a bridge. And the Marines said,
Right.
Okay, no problem. If you don't want to die, you better leave town right now. Because the curfew is, don't be alive in this town. We're coming house to house, and anything here is going to die. And they called it out. They said it. And they killed so many people because those dudes stayed. And I'm sure Chris Kyle was taking care of business. Those guys chose to stay. The Marines said, leave or die. Anybody who chooses to stay has to be bad. That's what we are selling you right now. So they cordoned the town, and they went through, and they swept it house by house.
Right.
And that is as rugged of combat as there is. You're going to go, imagine that happening in your hometown where you have to go house to house to go find every single bad guy individually and what they can do booby trap wise and RPGs and mines. I mean, no shit. That is as hard as you can go.
Well, they had months to set it up.
Yeah.
I mean, there was caches all over that town. There was the whole place was wired.
Yeah, yeah. And they had to go out every night. So again, you're going to have to pardon Chris for not liking the Iraqis for doing that.
Yeah.
Because that's a shitty thing to have to go through. And just say thanks, because you don't have to go do it. You don't have to ever have a day when you have to wear 2 plates in your vest to go to work.
Yeah, yeah. And, and the thing was, too, is, I mean, like Fallujah and Ramadi, it wasn't a matter, as many times the at least from what I've heard from a lot of guys, many times war is boredom followed by extreme terror, followed by days of boredom, but these guys, I mean, what impressed me and I felt was the craziest thing of all is it was every day. It wasn't a matter of if you were going to get in a firefight. It was every day and usually 2 or 3 times a day. I mean, it was that active the battlefield was in a lot of those engagements in both Fallujah, Ramadi, and Sadr City. You just knew it. You were going to go out there and it was going to get lit up. It wasn't, it was just for sure.
Yeah, we had Johnny Walker on, and he went out every day with the SEALs as well, and was an interpreter for him. And we also had when Johnny was on, Duke Harbin joined us, and Duke is a former SEAL. And one of the things that he and I both agree on is we are asking too much of those guys. That is a very hard and rigorous form of combat, and people don't sustain that. They all get shot, they all get blown up, and we all get PTSD. That's just how it is.
No, I tend to agree with you. And there was a lot of arguments too that, well, obviously you needed the fighting work of both the Marines and the SEALs and everybody else, Army, Navy, and Air Corps. But the bottom line is the battles and the engagements that were requested of this group of fighters was repeated and often. And I think that's one of the things, like you said, that really added to not only the casualty rates, but to the problems when we got home. I mean, you just can't keep that D-Day level of battle going for months and months and months without really causing a toll to somebody's psyche.
You want to talk about a different reality. I mean, aside from just the moral differences that you have to reconcile with when you are in a place where there's war, but for the stress of all of that on an extended basis, it's incredible. And, all of the statistics about all the bad things that happen to soldiers and sailors when they come home and the after effects, they really don't tell the story of the resilience of these guys.
Yeah. And I agree with you. And that's one of the things we described in good detail in the book. And, I think they did a pretty good job in the movie. It was, that Chris readily admitted that there were issues. And we wanted to admit that. We wanted others to read that. We wanted other men, women in combat to read that. And also that he got a lot better. I mean, he was doing a heck of a lot better. And I say this from a personal level because I know Chris. He was still deployed, or he was still in the SEALs right as he was getting out when I first got to know him. And, I witnessed a lot of stuff go on that, that never made it in the book and never made it in the, in any movie or anything else. But, and what he was dealing with. And then it got progressively better. And by the end, unfortunately, when he was taken from us by the whatever you want to call him in Texas, he was doing a heck of a lot better. And I was very pleased to see that it was there. And we described that in the book, though, too, that, look, you come back, you're in a tunnel. Let's recognize the fact that we are in a tunnel and that you are in a tunnel. And let's figure out how to get to that light, that's at the end of this tunnel. And let's work towards that. Not with prescription meds, not with a lot of the things that I've seen go on with the VA, but with working them through things to get people back to where they can be. Because you got to work yourself through it, and it can be done. And that was one of the messages we wanted to make in the book was it's okay to say you need the help, and you know what? There's a light at the end of the tunnel if you go and get it.
Maybe the most important thing, because the culture of soldiers and sailors and SEALs especially is one of self-sufficiency and toughness, of course. And when you come back, it's healthy to let your guard down. You've had your guard up for so long.
Sure.
And there's not enough, I think, ever that's said about that. And that's one of the things that we really applaud about the book. And we're so glad for the popularity of the book and the movie, because hopefully so many more people can understand what that toll looks like on a human level. These guys, for Chris, he was your friend. For everybody, we're talking about friends and brothers and sons who are coming back and, need the help. And need to be helped to admit that they could use the help.
Yeah, and and in the community too, and it's kind of weird because I've had my interactions with the community both mostly positive, but I've talked to some command level guys, and I think that the community itself and the culture, particularly the SEAL teams, your MARSOC guys, your Marine guys, is to say, look, I'm so damn tough that this doesn't affect me. Okay, I can watch my buddy get blown up and die on top of me and bleed out, and I can do this, and it doesn't affect me because I'm so goddamn tough. But let me tell you something. I think it should be the opposite. I think that we should say that every single person that's been at war has some damage done psychologically. Let's accept that. Let's just say to everybody, look, you're all got some issues, and let's find out the degree of those issues. And if those issues only take a week to get through, so be it. But if they take a month or 2 months or a year to get through, then so be it there. But nobody here is wrong for saying that they've got issues, because we consider everybody that we sent to war to have some issue, however minor or major. And then if you just take that attitude and that you need to work them back into society, then I think it's a more healthy thing. And that's just my own viewpoint. But I think that, I know a lot of SEALs, and I know a lot of SEALs that are pretty badass, and I'll tell you right now, every single one of them, when they came back, had some issues. I'm not saying they all do now, but I'm telling you, every single one of them did.
Well, when a Jeep comes back from the field, it's got some mud on it.
Sure.
I think that viewpoint and that perspective for future guys to come back and to say, oh, yeah, no, I'm okay. No. We know that that's not how it works. Nothing comes back from the field squeaky clean. So let's figure out where it is, and man,
and then that's and I'm not saying it's degree of or anything else. I'm just saying let's just start with that attitude that that's part of what happens, and maybe as a society we'll accept this. And I'm not saying everybody screwed up. I'm not, don't even get that from what I just said. And I know you're not, because you know exactly what I'm saying. But the bottom line is, I think that we need to. If I was going to tweak something in the culture, I would tweak in the culture, particularly in the SEAL teams. Just say, look, guys, when you do a 6-month deployment, and you've been in the middle of a solder city, or you've been in the middle of a battle, like we've seen in these different areas, or even if you had an engagement and you saw X, Y, and Z, or whatever, maybe it's better that we come back here in a week, for the first week we get back, we stay on base and we decompress before we let you go to your families, or before we go out and turn you loose, on the bars or whatever else. Let's just decompress a little while and kind of get a feel for where we are back again. And I think they're trying to do that more now. But I think that's a very good thing to do.
Yeah, have a process for it that's in place and that's standard.
Right. It's almost like going through a decompression chamber when you've done a deep dive, whatever. I don't care what you want to call it, but, I think that we would help a lot if we did that, because I think a lot of these issues that we see forming, and I've helped a lot of these guys with issues, with relationships or bar fights or whatever the hell you want to call it. It's just blowing off steam, man. It's decompressing. It's really decompressing when you come back from a battlefield, and we should expect that they need to do that because we've asked them to go do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can tell you, you put me on a plane coming back for 6 months from active combat tours. the last thing I want to do is go look at those monkeys anymore for 5 minutes,
I know.
weeks. Man, that is asking a lot of us.
I know it's asking a lot.
Yeah.
Maybe it's that last week before they come back and get you on that plane. I don't know, but you should have some time between being shot at and the next day you get off that goddamn plane and here you are. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like it's very difficult to do. You know, and one of the things that was described to me is Commander Zinke, Ryan Zinke, who's a good buddy of mine who I helped and did a lot of work to help get elected to Congress out of Montana. And his son-in-law, who I know as well, is a Navy SEAL, and he said, you know, we'd be driving down the road in Montana, and he'd be driving right in the middle of the goddamn road, you know, at 75 miles an hour, you know, on the freeway, and not even know he's doing it, you know, and see vehicles coming at you, and he wouldn't even be pulling over. It's like, you know, and he'd just be clicking back into the battle zone because, you know, when you're doing that in Afghanistan, you know, the IEDs, the farther you can get towards the center, the more difficult it is to kill you with the one that's on the side of the road.
Yeah, there's any number of things that you do, and you're right. The time, I know for me, like I would want to get that last mission in. What is the last day that I can go out on a mission? Because I've got a job to do, you know. And then after that,
No, I know.
within about 72 hours, I'm going to be home. You know, those 72 hours, you're just kind of in a cocoon, just waiting, and then you get home, and yeah. So for me, my pattern was, okay, physically now I'm home. I'm back in Florida, and about 3 days to a week later, I would mentally arrive. But emotionally,
Right.
I would never be home long enough because I'd be gone again. You know, I'd be home for
hear you.
2-3 weeks. And what your book did with that is important. And I don't know what the right answer is. I don't know if it is this decompression time or something else. But the fact is one of the best things that your book has done is gotten this conversation started. People that agree or don't agree, whatever, at least now there's a conversation about what it means to go out and do this. And boy, I can't. So specifically about the movie. And the book too, honestly. But when the movie starts, I'm like, okay, seen that, done that, had that happen to me. Oh, I've done that, and the whole movie was like that, step for step. Every storyboard they wrote was something that I had experienced. And
Well, that's good.
to include the
That's
time in
good.
to include the time in the bar when he's like, just give me a damn minute to have a beer and get home. I am trying to decompress. I don't want to do it on a post, but damn, just give me a minute. Let me relax.
Right. You know, the other thing, too, is, man, I mean, you know, one of the experiences I think that this country's gone through that a lot of people don't really put in historical perspective, but I think is important, is that, you know, we've been at war now for 13 years. We've got guys that have been doing back-to-back deployments now for 13 damn years, you know, and 14, coming on 14 in Afghanistan. And, you know, the bottom line is that's a long time to be at war, and it's a long time to expect your men and women to be at war. And never in our history has that really ever been done. And I think that's an important difference, if you will, in this series of battles that this country's fought for the last 14 years in both Iraq and Afghanistan, is that it's the longest standing war that we've really been in as a nation. Ever.
Right.
Yeah, ever. Yeah, and the people that we're going to go help have been in it longer, and they don't get to escape from it. So if we come back messed up, what are those guys? What do they have going on mentally? You know, and as we try to fix them, I will tell you right now, I've never heard anybody discuss that part of it, on the damage that those guys have to deal with, because they don't get to escape it. They just live in it, and you know, it makes it hard to accomplish the things we're trying to accomplish. So let's, you know, understand that, because that's a big lesson for everything. Everything is the culture and communication are two-way paths. And the sooner we can start to understand that, the sooner we can understand what Chris went through and what those Iraqis and what those Afghans have gone through, and start to figure out how to help them, instead of just saying, here's help. Here's what you need to change.
Yeah.
You haven't got the first clue.
No, I agree. And you know, I think it was deplorable the way we left that whole Iraq situation. So I think it was a complete... You know, I don't want to get political, but the bottom line is I think it was deplorable that we, you know, made those gains, shed the blood and the tears that we did doing it, not only us but them, and then just to say, oh yeah, we win, see you later, and
we
just
win.
Have that back and just collapse.
Yeah.
If you like the show,
And you know you do,
send us some pictures of your movies.
don't do that. Support the show.
There are 3 ways you can support us.
Number 1, go to iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you listen to podcasts.
And leave a 5-star rating and review.
It helps with the show metrics and helps us get better placement. Number 2,
Visit our website.
www.breakitdownshow.com.
We've got an Amazon and an eBay link.
Same Amazon, same eBay you know and love, but they give us a little kickback when you get to their site from ours. And number 3, leave comments about the shows that you like. We want to know what you think, how you feel.
Tell us how to make the show better. We greatly appreciate it.
Now back to the show.
We like boobies.
Hey, so let's do change gears. Let's get something different going on. Let's talk about something more positive.
All right.
So what's next?
Well, what I'm working on now is I did a series of books that I really enjoyed doing, a novel series that are really factually based novels. I like to call them faction instead of, even though they're novels and they're technically fiction. We're in a situation now where, where I had a whole body of stories that were never going to see the light of day, but were every bit as important as I felt the stories that could make it through DoD review. And so I fictionalized a lot of those stories and put them into my Sniper Elite series, the first one being Sniper Elite One-Way Trip. And really the first book deals with the pilot from the 160th SOAR, female taken prisoner, and one of the first female pilots of the SOAR, which, works a lot with Spec Ops troops, and what they're willing to do to get this woman back. And it kind of has, some Jessica Lynch-ish flair to it, but it really takes a lot of prisoner extract and prisoner recovery stories that I heard from, a lot of my buddies that were involved in that, and kind of takes it to that level. Because, when you get American troops taken prisoner, your rules of engagement change substantially. And, this book kind of covers, what it is to be in a situation where, you either get the prisoner back or they're going to die with you, because you're not going to leave them there to get their head cut off.
You're supposed to make it a lighter thing, Scott.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't trying to be lighter, but I was, and it's really fun. It's fun to do that because I get to distill in the character, my lead character, Gil Shannon, who's the guy, he's a SEAL Team 6 operator, sniper, but
right.
he gets to basically use the skill set of all the King guys I know, all the Marine guys I know, that roughness, that toughness, that humanity, as well as the whole skill set, and use those, in a very, interesting way. And so it was really fun to write. I'm on my third one of those. It's coming out with Simon & Schuster, and Target America was the second. And then, and it's interesting to see, like this one, like the storyline in the first one was that they were asking, a ransom for this American pilot. People are like, well, these big terrorist organizations don't do that. Oh, really? Those ISIS right now is asking $200 million for 2 Japanese journalists. And actually, I don't know if they're asking 200 for the last one after the first one got his head cut off, but, this is a bad bunch we're dealing with. And, and I like writing heroic stories in defeat of a bad bunch. It's kind of, it's fun to do. And those right now it looks like we're probably going to have a movie deal on that within the next very short period of time.
Right now, your book is number one, New York Times bestseller, and the story from the movie from that story is also number one in the theaters and has been for weeks. It's the all-time most successful January movie ever. Holy shit, dude! Way to go!
Yeah, it's crazy. It's just crazy. The reaction, has been really, really unbelievable. Not only here in the United States either, man. It's worldwide. It's like the people of the world are kind of grasping onto the idea that we don't have to be held hostage by these guys. And, there's people out there like Chris Kyle that are willing to step up and, and take out the evil. I think that message resonates with a lot of people in the Western world right now, especially with what we've seen in Paris recently, and as well as other, parts of the world where these guys have pulled their shenanigans, if you will.
Yeah, I'm here to tell you, there's people out there that will hurt us, and they have no problem doing it. So it's okay to have Chris Kyle out there. We want Chris Kyle out there.
Yeah. So, it's caused a lot of, what I really like about it too is it's caused a lot of people to think about, our troops. And it's really caused a lot of people to support and to step up and say, maybe it is time that we did something to support our men and women that have been fighting these battles for us, because they sure as hell don't get paid well. I need to tell you that. In comparison to, other jobs or whatever, maybe you're getting some retirement out of it, but, if you get 20, but bottom line is you're underpaid for what you're doing. You're doing it for the country, in a very dangerous line of work that you could, not come home to your family at any given time. And we better recognize that there's people out there making these sacrifices. And I think that American Sniper has really done a good job of bringing that home.
That's why your
You know,
book matters. Yeah, absolutely. And maybe you come home and you don't have a family anymore. How often has that happened?
Yeah.
Where everything you had just earned for the last 6 months and your pickup truck and your dog are all gone. I know that guy several times over. Yep.
Oh, yeah.
My wife
Yeah.
is gone. Yeah.
No, I know, dude. The other thing is, that even on those relationships and on those women that have to stay at home here and raise the kids and whatever, maybe this gives them a little bit more reason to stick around. I mean, maybe it gives them a little bit more reason to appreciate what their spouse is doing, even though, they're the one home here changing the diapers, etc. I don't know, but I've heard from a lot of people that it really helped their spouses that were here to understand a little bit more about what their person was going through.
Yeah, we're really happy for the success of the book and the movie, and it's remarkable. But the thing that we like is that it is so important, and that's even better. So you don't have a whole lot of time. You're welcome. Thank you. You don't have a whole lot of time for lawyering anymore, huh?
No. I mean, I've still got a shingle, but the shingle is not. Let's just say I'm not doing much of it right now. I mean, I'm pretty much doing media with the movie and the books and things of that nature. So there's not a lot of time for law, and frankly, I need to recover from it anyway. So I'm done with it.
You've got PTSD from being a lawyer.
Yeah. I'm telling you, I grew tired of it, and I enjoy writing. So if it can pay the bills, then so be it.
You can get Chris's, Scott's, and Jim's book, American Sniper, right there, either at the Jim DeFelice show or in Scott's show. There'll be a link right there. All you got to do is click on it. It'll take you right into Amazon, and you can get American Sniper or any of Scott's other books.
Great. I appreciate that, guy. You can look it up on scottmcEwen.com, too. I got a pretty average website, I would say, there for myself, but gives a little idea of what we're doing, what interviews, things of that nature.
Yeah, there's a lot of good info on there, too. It's interesting reading.
Yeah, well, thanks.
1,000 yards to kill an elk. So tell me what's too far. Like, man, that thing's 1,400 meters out. I can't do it.
I think the real limiter for the round is not so much that the round wouldn't have stopping power, but that you're really kind of messing with where you're going to hit your animal. And at that range, you really do need to hit the animal in a vital spot in order to not just wound him and let him run. So the energy on a bullet bleeds a lot with that kind of distance. So you don't have the stopping power you do, say, for example, at close range where it's, at its maximum velocity. So I just think that the limitation, rather than saying it wouldn't be able to do it or you couldn't possibly do a Kentucky, shot and get it done, is more, are you being a responsible sportsman in trying to make that shot?
Yeah, you want to treat the animal with the respect it deserves, and
exactly,
you can't take a shot that's too crazy. That's true.
Yeah, if you wound at that range too, it's exceedingly difficult to find your animal.
Yeah, if you take down a moose weighs over 1,000 pounds. How the hell do you get it out?
How many guys you got to have with you?
Yeah, because you can cut the guts out, but that does only weigh so much. I mean, a moose femur must weigh 15 pounds.
Easy, but no, I mean, I've hunted moose actually in Alaska. And the funny thing is with moose is they're usually in the wettest, craziest world, muskeg and, shallow lakes and things of that nature when you hunt them. So you got that terrain to deal with, and then some of these moose hunts, particularly around large bear areas, is when you shoot the moose, it's a dinner bell for Mr. Grizz. And so you got to be real careful of your back when Mr. Grizz comes to collect on what he considers to be his dinner.
Wow.
Because he has trouble bringing them down, but he doesn't have any trouble stealing them from you. And they know that if you don't have a bear tag, it's not an excuse to shoot one.
They know that.
Because he's stealing your moose.
They do. They know. No, you're right. What does a moose head weigh? Like when you go to bring that moose head back and put it on your wall, that thing's got to be an enormous amount of weight. It's got to be tons.
100 plus pounds, particularly if you got much of a rack.
Right. So you got 100 plus pounds of head to get back. Each hind quarter has to weigh similarly. I mean, there's a ton of muscle there. That's just a lot of animal to carve up. It's easy to think, oh, you just go kill a moose and you bring it back. No, if you don't have an ATV, you're not going to get that whole animal out. Something's going to come.
Well, you got to quarter them up, and sometimes you got to bone them out right there. Which means you basically cut the meat off the bone on site. So as a responsible sportsman, you try and save as much meat as you can, but sometimes you got to do you got to bone your animal right there and get down to your hams and your pieces of meat. So it can be difficult depending on the environment where you're at.
And you got to watch your back while you're doing it too.
Oh yeah. Many times, especially in Alaska, you got to load it up in a float plane, and you got weight limitations there too.
Wow.
Yeah, it's all about logistics. That's what life is. Life's all about logistics.
Yeah, especially when you're hunting, man. You got to know what you're doing. It's like a learned skill. Just like in the military, you learn a lot. I mean, your first tour, you're pretty much probably just watching everybody else do that been there before. But by the end, you're the guy that's teaching, and same way with hunting.
One skill that you acquire when you're gone a lot in a combat zone and you get mortared every day is as you walk, you think, where will I go right now if a mortar comes? And now where will I go right now? And where will I? And it never stops. You have to always be ready because next thing you know, you hear that football wiggling in, and you got to know where. There's no time to look. You've got to know where to go, and that is a crazy skill. And that's hard to turn that skill off. By the way, you walk around for a while going, where would I go? Where would I go? Where would I go? Who's going to get me? Oh man, all that stuff doesn't ever stop. So you pick that up over time, and it's hard to shake.
Yeah, I bet you guys get into situations where. Sometimes cover doesn't exist.
Yeah, no, it doesn't sometimes. Sometimes you just figure, I'll just lay flat on the ground right here and hope.
As a hobbyist, you put yourself in some interesting positions, though, Scott. You hunt where there's bear. Never mind what it is you're hunting, but there's also bear. You surf where there's sharks. And you hang out often with seals. So
yeah,
that's business.
Yeah, well, sometimes boredom overtakes you, but, I try not to let it happen too often.
Yeah. Hey, tell us something that we don't know about Chris Kyle. You got to know him intimately. What do we need to know that hasn't been shared out there?
Well, he, like all other military guys that are back here that I think came back, ultimately just wanted people not to say, hey, great job, or pat him on the back or anything like that. I think he just, like a lot of military guys, just want people to recognize what they've done. And it doesn't mean that you have to go out and grab them and say thank you in the airport or something like that. But just as a society and as a whole, people should recognize the sacrifice that people have done, that our men and women have done for the military. And that's really what Chris Kyle wanted. And I think that sometimes that's lost, that they don't want a pat in the back per se. They just want people, the other 99% of the population that's at the shopping mall, to at least realize that we've got, men and women with boots on the ground in harm's way. And I think that's really, at the end of the day, what I think a lot of military people would like to see.
Hey, thanks a million for talking with us. And, man, congratulations on all the success.
Way to go.
Yeah, we couldn't congratulate
Well, thank you, and thank you for your service, too.
Hey, thanks, man. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. We'll talk to you guys soon, and put it up, and I'm looking forward to the post.
Terrific.
Take care.
Take care.
All right, thanks.
Hey, you guys. We really appreciate that you listen to the Break It Down show. And if you want to support us, there's a few different ways you can do it. First of all, keep listening. Second of all,
leave comments. We love to hear what you have to say, and that lets other people know, hey, this is a good show.
Yeah, absolutely. Do that. Leave comments.
Click on the links next to the individual guest and support the show by supporting that artist. Whether it's a book or whether it's a piece of music, support them and support us.
Yeah. Also, go to iTunes or Stitcher or Podomatic or wherever you listen to podcasts and leave us some 5-star reviews, man.
That does help.
Yeah, that helps the metrics of the show. It helps placement for where people can see the show. It affects the availability and how visible we are. So if you guys, here's the deal. We'll make you a deal right
Here's
now.
the deal.
If you get onto your favorite app and you give us a 5-star rating and you write something nice about the show, take a screenshot of it, send it to us through the website, thebreakitdownshow.com, and we'll send you, what are we going to send them?
T-shirt.
A T-shirt.
T-shirt.
Exciting.
Until we run out of T-shirts, we will do that.
Yeah. They keep making more.
Yeah, they keep showing up.
So, yeah, absolutely.
Hey, you know what else you could do to support the show? Tell one friend. Just one friend and say, hey, I like the Break It Down show. You should listen to it. And if you got to twist their arm a little bit, twist their arm for me. I'm asking you, twist their arm.
Do it. All right.
Thank you.